Good morning. Thank you. There we go. My name's John Rutan. I hope you're all enjoying Dartmouth so far. The shows last night, from a cappella to comedy to fashion, I hope you got a chance to look at those. Those were great, put on by fellow 12s, I might add. Now, I have the honor of introducing two giants among men, and this is quite literal for one of them, who together have given over 7 decades of service to Dartmouth. And as a first year, I'm really only beginning to come to appreciate what they've done for this school. And I can tell you that it's something very special, that these two people have been an integral part of the Dartmouth experience. Their enduring partnership with each other and with Dartmouth will leave a lasting legacy. Please, let's give a warm welcome to a couple whose love for Dartmouth is legendary, President Wright and Mrs. Wright.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Not fitting for someone in your staff.
Thanks.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Right or left?
Whatever you want. Good morning. We want to thank you, John, for your generous and gracious introduction. We want to thank you and Melissa and all of the members of your committee for the work that you've done to help arrange this weekend. And I hope that you know that students in the class of 12 really are the driving force in taking care of all of the details for this weekend. Linda Kennedy and her colleagues work closely with them, support them, give them good advice. But we want to thank them all. They also were in charge of the weather. I think they did a pretty good job with the weather. Susan and I were talking about just how it is we could do a program this morning with you and the time that we have, given the wonderful series of presentations you've had over the last couple of hours. And we were urged to sort of talk about what we think is important here. And I've been here for 40 years. I'm finishing my 40th year at Dartmouth. I came here to teach history in 1969. In fact, among the members of the class of 2012, are, I think, a dozen or so whose mother or father I taught a history course to in the 1970s and 80s, and it's really a treat for me to see them and their sons and daughters here today. I've had a lot of conversations. I try to have weekly lunches with students when they come to my office, and lately we've been talking about sort of the world out there, and I realized when I came here in 1969, we talked a lot about the world out there as well, but this is a different sort of world and different sort of issues. And one of the things that I continue to tell students and their parents is that they're here for a liberal arts education. And a liberal arts education provides them an opportunity to have the knowledge, the judgment, the sense of who they are and what their values are, and the capacity to learn and unlearn that will serve them well no matter what it is that they do. And I often tell parents at this weekend, when the first-year parents come in, to just let your son or daughter decide what the courses they want to take. I know there's a lot of give and take on that, but what I keep telling parents and students is, believe me, that the class that you take next week is not going to determine what your career is going to be. And the major that you select is not going to determine the nature of your life. You should take classes and take majors of things that intellectually interest you. You should make certain that you sort of follow your own best instincts because they've stood you well so far. And you'll go on to do a lot of remarkable things in your lives. Because as a historian and one who's been here for a while, I would defy anyone to tell me that they could have foretold 25 years ago, when some of you were in college, these are exactly the courses I want you to take. And if you do that, you'll be all set for the rest of your life. There's no way to know what these young men and young women are going to be dealing with in the years 2025, 2030, 2040, the rest of their lives. And they are the leaders of this century. I also tell students that they spend far too much time planning things. And I assure them that they should not do that, that lives are things to be lived rather than to be planned. It does not mean that you sort of randomly bounce around, obviously. I'm not suggesting that. But this generation of young people, unlike those when I first came here, who were sort of indifferent to a lot of things that were going to happen to them in the future, perhaps, this generation of young people, and indeed some of them from the time they're in kindergarten, have been sort of laying out everything. I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, and I've got to make sure that I check off all of these things. Lives are things to be lived rather than to be planned. And I think that that's what a liberal arts education enables them to do exactly that, to understand who they are and what it is that they stand for, to really know what their values are. And knowing your own values is just a crucial first step in the capacity to go on and exercise a good judgment in those situations that students will encounter all of their lives that will require their good judgment. I enjoy immensely the opportunity to have these conversations with your sons and daughters and other Dartmouth students. It's what affirms for me why it is I have the best job in the world. I spent a lot of time, obviously, looking at budgets and union contracts and retirement contracts and putting on what I call the green eye shade part of my job. But there's a headmaster in me, an old history teacher as well. And what I really do to get energized is just to go out and talk to students. And I have a partner and a companion in this who just delights in working with students and trying to help them think through those things that are troubling them or things that excite them. And what we thought we would do is I could sort of give this 5,000-foot view of what I've been doing and what it is that I say to your sons and daughters, and Susan could maybe share with you some of her experiences, because she's been advising students in every sort of role imaginable over the last 30 years. And she has former students of hers coming back here now as well and thanking her for advice that she's given them. It's a role that she continues to play. So we thought that perhaps she could share just a few observations on 30-plus years of doing that, and then we could really see what questions you might have, because I think that's the most useful way for us to respond to you, is to see what's on your mind.
Well, thank you, Jim, and good morning. We had a series of senior dinners the last couple of weeks. These are dinners for seniors, and it reminded me when Jim quipped that it's our senior spring too, that how sweet it is, senior spring. And it's really caused me to reflect on some of my student advising experiences. There is nothing like seeing a senior whom you met the first year and seeing he or she come into his own. I was reminded also of those days when I was actively the pre-med advisor or the class dean or the international student advisor. I was reminded of different students that I had spoken with over time. And I think one position I particularly loved was when I, during the class dean years, would land with the sophomores. And that, of course, is the first year that they're really grappling with the choice of a major. And the sophomore year is that year where all of a sudden everything is uncharted territory. And it seemed to me that these students would rush in sort of breathless with so many possibilities, so many opportunities. And who among us wouldn't be overwhelmed? I mean, how do you choose from this richness? And I think pre-meds is an example of those students who have always planned everything, the ones who entered thinking, I want to pursue a career in medicine. And they're so focused on those requirements that are quite structured. If you don't get a running start, you can trade off an awful lot of elective freedom in the years ahead. But those students, when they came up against sophomore year, perhaps this isn't really what I want to do. Well, that is probably the most anguishing time, an example for a student, but I also think that that's, the earlier this happens, perhaps the better. Many of those students, as you know, come back and reaffirm this choice. They might do it well. It might be well to finish this after college, their requirements. But in any event, I think that this sophomore year isn't to be underestimated. It is a time of great possibility, great excitement. I thought it might be interesting to just share with you a couple of the students that Jim and I have talked with this week. And one of them is her father is Jim's former student, and she actually isn't a senior, she's a junior. And she told me that she had an early midlife crisis. March of her high school year. Because in March, she heard a wonderful cellist, and this student is a violinist, but this student loves history. She had a crisis because she suddenly realized she had made the wrong decision. She had chosen Dartmouth. She really should have chosen a conservatory. It wasn't history after all she wanted to study, it was music. Well, here we are 2 years later. It turns out she was meant to come here. The first year book a year ago was Shostakovich. She ended up in 2 music courses her first term. No, she isn't a history major, but she has gone on, she's still playing the violin, but she's gone on to manage the Dartmouth Symphony Orchestra. So I think that she's an example, perhaps in the arts, but she's an example of somebody who was just devastated for a year and a half. What am I ever going to do? And it's all worked out. We have lots more examples. I think the thing that I have found talking to seniors particularly is, you know, if they regret what they chose to major in, and some of them do, not all is lost by any means because they've gained 2 interests. And the ones who had the courage sophomore year, right in the spring, to change their minds, and that means doubling up junior year in major courses, taking 4 courses in some cases. Those students who have chosen to do that, I think those students are so passionate, so sure of what they want to study. And I think rather than go through a litany of examples, you all, I'm sure, have more experience with, you know, firsthand with your kids, that perhaps Jim, should just go right to questions.
Be happy to do that. And I think Linda has a microphone and she'd be happy to come around, and we're open to any questions you want to ask.
President Wright, one of the great difficulties, I think the core of the difficulties in Washington today in our economy is greed. What does Dartmouth teach to prevent greed? I know we have the Ethics Institute, but what more can we or should we be doing? I had a discussion the other night with somebody who said that ethics should be a required course. What do you think?
I don't know an answer to that, because it's just such a fundamental value, and you know, a lot of the students who come here come from backgrounds where their family do not have means, and I think that the opportunity for them to get a job and really feel financially secure for the first time anyone in their family has ever felt financially secure is something that we can only say yes, do that. I think what we've come to learn over the last few years is that a comfortable life, at least for some people, have more digits in it than we used to think was necessary for a comfortable life, and I think that's troubling. And my message to seniors, and it may be that seniors is a bit too late, but I often, and I will do it again this June, because I've been thinking about exactly that when I give my final commencement address. I introduce them to the 50-year class that's here and tell them that the 50-year class has discovered that this 50-year anniversary of their graduation has come on them quickly, and I say that they would have a range of answers if you ask them, has your life been successful, and what has caused it to be successful? And I said, I'll bet you that none of them will measure success with something that has dollar signs in it, even though some of them may well have had a rich and a full life where they have indeed accumulated some money. But it's easier for somebody in their 70s to say, no, a good life is not something that is simply marked by dollar signs. It's harder. I think that our whole culture has had a jolt in that regard, and I would not want to call it a healthy jolt because too many people have been hurt by this. Too many people have been hurt badly by this. But I you know, clearly our judgment of what constituted a good life and the amount of money that one should accumulate, I think has gotten quite out of hand recently, and I keep reminding our students that those who come to Dartmouth are privileged. I told this to some students at a meeting just recently, that they have worked hard, They're incredibly bright and able. But I said, don't for a moment think that you have worked the hardest or you're the brightest or the most able of your generation. You're also lucky. You're lucky to be at a place like this. There are plenty of people out there as bright and as quick and as hardworking as you that will never have the opportunity to come even close to a school like Dartmouth. And what you have to do is recognize that with the privilege of going to a place like this comes a responsibility, and it's a responsibility that you'll carry for the rest of your lives. And this has been a consistent theme of mine, Jerry, and I've talked to people about it for a lot of years, and I did in my inauguration, and I will continue to do that in my last talk at Dartmouth in a couple of weeks. I think Dartmouth students, our graduates, have basically set a pretty good model. They have gone on to do a lot of things that have been very responsible. Obviously, some of them have done very well financially, and there's nothing wrong, obviously, with doing well financially. That's not the point or the issue. It's how one sets priorities in life and what one does as a result of successes that you've had. And I think it's a mindset that we all need to work on.
And I think that the ethics example on campus, I mean, and there are many, this year has certainly been the main stage production in the theater next door, the Moore Theater, Grapes of Wrath. And those students who were in the cast, and all of us on campus who saw the Grapes of Wrath, couldn't have seen a more timely story. And the focus of a lot of those discussions was surely about ethics. So, I think that our students are, and in economics classes, the students will often tell me how exciting to be taking economics right now and the discussions they're having. So I think this is an informal curriculum, but I agree with you, Jerry. I think that we all have a responsibility institutionally to make sure we're ethical.
As an alumnus and as a parent, I would like to thank both of you for everything that you've done for the college. And I'd like to say that Dartmouth has truly thrived during your leadership here. However, we're about to have a transition, and I'd like to ask you for your opinion in terms of what you think soon-to-be President Kim will be doing perhaps differently, or what are his visions for the college going forward?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm in a position, or even if I were, that I would want to go into a sort of an assessment, except in very general terms. And my assessment is very positive. Susan and I had the privilege of meeting Jim Kim and Yoon Suk Lim earlier this winter for the first time. We certainly knew of him through his work and through reading Mountains Beyond Mountains, and we're very inspired by him. And I continue to be very inspired by him. I think that he's building on something that's been pretty fundamental at Dartmouth for a long time, having to do with responsibility, having to do with an eagerness and a willingness to try to make the world a better place, having to do with assuming some real role in trying to help those who are not able to help themselves. And so I think that fits naturally at Dartmouth. I think that he's a major international figure. He's very well regarded and well respected. He has a tremendous energy, and he values those things that I think are fundamental to Dartmouth, having to do with the core undergraduate program and what it is that we're able to do. And Dartmouth has some wonderful professional schools and graduate programs, and we always need to remember that. But our niche in higher education is clearly one of, I think, providing the finest undergraduate experience in the country. And the strength of that comes because of the strength of these graduate and professional programs. Having our students are taking classes this spring with Tuck School faculty, some of the people who are in the top business school in the world. They're working in the laboratories of people in the medical school. They're able to take engineering science majors at the engineering school. These are not things that are simply available in the best liberal arts colleges, and so it's an opportunity that they have here. Large universities have these same programs, but undergraduates don't get close to them, and I think that's part of the richness of Dartmouth. And I have every confidence that that Jim Kim will put his own mark on Dartmouth, and I'm as excited as anyone in seeing what that will be. I'm as prepared as anyone to help and applaud that, but I also believe that he is rooted in some values that I find very familiar Dartmouth values, and so I'm more than happy to see him assume this responsibility. Linda?
There is perhaps no greater honor than for us as alumni to entrust our children with you for 4 more years of education. I think that was a very valid observation you made. My question has to do with the economic climate now. Obviously the college has had to cut back in certain aspects and perhaps not the core, but if the core is cut back, is someone going to entrust that things be reinstated when the economy turns around? In other words, is attention going to be given to those cutbacks that they not be permanent at the college?
Yeah, I was not looking to spend my last year making major reductions in expense, but nobody in this room was looking to spend this last year, I expect, making the adjustments that you've all had to make and some of your financial planning. And it's a responsibility that I took on. And we did not take this on with an idea of let's find some temporary cuts. We took this on with an idea of trying to identify some things, some expenses that we could reduce in ways that would be sustainable going forward, which is not at all to say that somebody in the future, if resources were available, wouldn't want to restore one or another of these things. But we didn't leave it. There are no time bombs, no promises lurking there where somebody has to assume in 2012 we're obligated to bring this back or to do this. There is no such commitment. It would be inappropriate for me to make such a commitment on behalf of my successor, and I don't think it's the way you can manage the budget of an institution like this. This was an exceedingly difficult process for all of us, and I sometimes joke that I stayed a year too long. I could have been hanging out someplace without a necktie on and wondering what my successor was doing. But you know what, in truth, I've never for a moment thought that I should have left a year ago. It's appropriate that I participate in this, as difficult as it was. We ended up needing to cut back 150 positions, which is very hard, but this is a labor-intensive activity here, and we tried every way we could to reduce the number of layoffs, and of those 150, only 60 were layoffs. I reviewed every one with the person making them. I asked questions about them. I know some of these people, and it troubled me greatly, but I didn't try to micromanage how people were doing that, and so we have moved ahead. We've protected those things that I believe needed to be protected, which is financial aid for students and the strength of the academic programs, including the tenure track faculty slots. Other than that, everything was open for consideration. It was a good process. We had a lot of input. We consulted widely with students, with staff, with faculty on it, and then we made the calls that we have to make. But there's nothing out there that, there are no promises that somebody's going to have to keep in the future. There's surely things that I would love to see come back in the future, but that would be up to President Kim and his administration.
Susan, since I have the microphone, I can ask a question, I guess. Could you talk a little bit about the way that seniors are different this year than in past years, maybe as it relates to the economy, the things they're thinking about and talking about?
Well, we asked our seniors at these dinners how they were feeling, and you know, there's just tremendous optimism and idealism among the young, and they are young. And as one of them said, you know, I think just so wisely, one of them said, well, you know, we haven't experienced this yet. You know, it's not like us looking at them, you know, from our experience, our standpoint. So there is that. They're certainly not unrealistic. They're aware, obviously, through the recruiting process. But you know, what really strikes me is all of our students, we've noticed over the years, increasingly these are global. You know, everybody's interested in something global. They have languages. They're very interested in doing good. Social justice and community development. These students are convinced that they can make a difference, and they are already with their internships. So the number, Linda, who are choosing education, I mean, and not, you know, everything from certainly the traditional education positions, but a lot of them are just going to do internships again, working with one program in Boston, this MATCH program. We have a program for undergraduates, the SEED program. They're really doing more education. A lot of them, obviously, graduate school. But then what we're hearing a lot of is a gap year. The ones who are able to cobble together their finances are really looking to travel and do something short term. So these are just, you know, these are the living example of a liberal arts education at Dartmouth. I mean, they are truly liberated, and I don't think that I think our future is in the best possible hands it could be. I think these students will find a way.
Yeah, I don't worry about the future of the Republic. We're able to see the future of the Republic on this campus, and I feel good, I feel optimistic, as I say to our students, you still don't know how to wear a baseball cap straight on your heads, and you haven't learned to look for cars before you cross the street, but other than that, I have full confidence in your generation.
Thank you.
Not to shift the focus away from the future, but I have to ask the inevitable question to both of you of looking back over your time here, perhaps the greatest challenges that come to mind, and perhaps the things that you find most rewarding in the time you've been here.
Yeah, that's a question that people ask from time to time, and it's a hard question to answer. I think that, you know, the most challenging times have been times of tragedy that we've had, where there's a 9/11, when basically we had to stop operations and to figure out what had happened. We had students who were out on freshman trips, and we need to get word out to them, and we got the cross-country team to run out along the trails, along the streams of northern New England, and we're out there by midday to summarize for these kids what had happened, because we had no way of knowing who among our students may have had somebody who worked in those buildings or might have been traveling then. The brutal murder of 2 faculty members several years ago who were friends of ours, of Susan's and mine, and lived out right around the corner from where we had lived for 15 years before we moved into the president's house. It was a tremendously trying time for the community. We've had obviously student deaths, and we've had just, you know, there's nothing more traumatic for a community than this. And I think that those are the times that try us. But I you know, after the homicides and 9/11, my theme has always been the same. When we held an open house to invite students just to come over and talk and to be with them. We went out in the green after 9/11 and met with students. And nobody, no community can be immune from bad things happening. Some bad things happen some places far more frequently than they should, and more frequently than others, but there's no way you can be immune from bad things happening. The test of a community is how it responds to bad things happening. And I think that's the test that I keep trying to remind our students that sometime they're going to be tried in those ways, and I have every confidence that they will do well. I think that the best occasions here, I mean, personally, I love my inauguration, with my mother sitting in the front row with Susan, and my mother, who had been convinced for years I finally would amount to something, was able to say yes. But I, you know,
she knew what Dartmouth was.
What I've enjoyed the most, and what I'm going to miss the most, will be just times with students. I'm an old teacher. When I became president, something like 5% of the Dartmouth alumni had taken a history course with me, and I love the classroom. I loved history. I love teaching history, and I like now having a chance just to go over to Collis, or Susan and I go over to Thayer Dining Hall and sit down with some students at dinner and just talk to them, or the weekly lunches in my office, or going over, as we will in a few minutes, to the baseball game and then the softball game, and it's energizing to be with them, and I think those have been the high points of 40 years for me, And those are the ones I'll miss the most, because even though we can continue to be part of this community and we'll always be, by choice, more on the margins in the future. We'll never have those opportunities in quite the same way again.
Well, I was the last women's class at Vassar, and I'd never seen Dartmouth before. My closest friend spent 4 years in the basement of Theta Delta, and the letters she would write me were scandalous. And I thought, you know, I definitely not having the same academic or educational experience. And then I ended up coming to work at Dartmouth, and I had really spent my education. I loved my college, I loved my professors, but I really was preoccupied in college. And I came here relatively young. I probably was 30. And I experienced this co-educational environment, not knowing, of course, the growing pains really, but looking in on this. And one of my early jobs, well, I could have continued teaching at the public schools, the third grade at the Ray School, and I nearly did that, but I took a chance, and I needed the full-time job, but I thought, you know, to live in Hanover and not have any association with the college would really be, I think it would be short-sighted. So I took the gamble. I took this half-time position as a research assistant. The dean of faculty, who was also the provost, hired me, and the job was to research curricula. This was a time when they were considering going back to the great issues and the great books. And I had the most amazing introduction to the college, and all the while I'm meeting students, and then I switched over to the side I really wanted to be. I found that I love the third graders, but I really love the college students. And so then, you know, the rest, as they say, is history. But, you know, all by way of saying that I really feel I came of age at Dartmouth, and that's been so personally rewarding, but it's through this vicarious experience of students. I've never not been interested in the student who is, I hope, meeting faculty. It's the intersection between students and faculty. That's where the excitement is. And I've never not talked to a student and just been so inspired by what this student is doing and able to do. So I would say, you know, I mean, I pinch myself. I have advised a women's, we have the senior society group of them, and there's a women's group that I've advised since I came here. And of course, I have a different role now. I mean, you know, I'm not advising students in the office one-on-one these days, but through that group, over time, what we've seen, I mean, you know, it's just generation after generation of just wonderful students. So, you know, there's certainly been some difficult times. I have to say that the best time ever was when I looked outside on the election, the night of election, the next morning, you know, 1 a.m., and there were all these students, and they weren't coming to protest the SLI or the swim team. They were coming to share the excitement of the presidential election. So that definitely would have to be a high. So yeah, it's just been what a thrill.
Unfortunately, I know that Mr. and Mrs. Wright would like to stay all afternoon and chat, but they've got someplace else they've got to be in. We've got sunshine outside, and baseball doubleheader and softball doubleheader, so let's thank them for their time.
Thank you. Thank you.